Trying to think of the nikun of Rabbi Elimelech. Ay lai lai, ay lai lai, ay lai lai, ay da da lai lai lai, ay da da lai lai lai, ay lai 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 lai, ay da da lai 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 lai, ay da da lai 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 lai, ay la lai, ay lai, ay la lai lai. Hi, da da la 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 la, hi, da da la 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 la, hi na na, hi la, hi la la la, hi la la la, hi la la la, ah ha 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 hi la, hi da da la la la, hi da da la la. I lie, lie. I la lie, I lie, lie. I the day la lie, I lie, lie. I la lie, I lie, I la lie, lie. I the day la lie, I lie, lie. I the day la lie, la lie, lie. I la lie, I lie, I la lie, lie. I la la la, I la la la, ah ha ha, I la 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 la, I la 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 la, I la. Shalom Aleichem to Katie and to Zahava, who are watching, and unfortunately Aryeh isn't feeling well, so he's not here tonight. And Aryeh brings Me'ira, so I don't expect to see Me'ira, and Me'ira many times brings Malki, and sometimes Korach shows up, but right now it's just me and the holy sisters that are watching, and of course Shalom Aleichem to my mother, and to David, and Avital, and everybody who watches afterwards. Shalom Aleichem to you. So, we're going to continue in our lesson in lesson 72 in Likutey Moharan, Bezrat Hashem. And if you remember, Rabbi Nachman is talking about when a person has thoughts of doing tshuva. So, immediately, I'm going to move the table a little bit. Immediately, they kill their yetzer. So the question is, if you kill your yetzer when you have thoughts of doing tshuva, how come the yetzer comes back? And he says, what happens is, there's a new yetzer. And then he talks about the two types of yetzer. He also says, well, what happens with the yetzer? So you have this idea, he calls it traveling to the tzaddik. You have this idea, you want to go to Rabbi Nachman's grave in Uman, for example. And that is, and I've said many times before, that's also an analogy for going out of your comfort zone. And he says, then you make the decision to buy the ticket, and then you lose your enthusiasm for it. And then you get yourself on the plane and you start traveling, and then as you're getting closer, you lose your enthusiasm for it. And all of this is the yetzer. And he says it's a new yetzer that's coming. Every time you go up another level, you're going to get a new yetzer. So there apparently is an infinite number of yetzerats. And then he says, okay, we have the normal person that's tempted to do things that they shouldn't do. And then we have people like David HaMelech and Melech Shlomo, King Solomon and King David. We have people on like this great spiritual level, right? David HaMelech, and he sinned with Bathsheba. But Rabbi Nachman says, don't think that it was just a sin of lust. He says that King David knew that Bathsheba was meant to be his wife, obviously because they had Shlomo, and Shlomo was the king that built the Beit HaMikdash. However, it wasn't the time, and he wasn't patient, and that for him was a yetzer. And Shlomo, he said the same thing. The day that he built the Beit HaMikdash, he married Pharaoh's daughter. And he said, so how can it be that somebody like King Shlomo is on such a high spiritual level, he builds the Beit HaMikdash, and that he marries the daughter of Pharaoh, who I compared to the daughter of Hitler. It would be a totally absurd thing for a king of Israel to marry the daughter of Pharaoh. But he did. And they brought him to idol worship, these non-Jewish wives that he married. And he thought that he was going to elevate them, but instead he was affected by them. And Rabbi Nachman calls this Malach Kodesh. This is a yetzer that comes like it's a divine heavenly angel, meaning that it's a high spiritual force, but it's still a yetzer. So that's where we left off. We're going to continue. Lachar shehodia lanu ki yetzer ba mehagvurot ve'u memidat adin. After he explained that the yetzer, where does the yetzer come from? It comes from this high spiritual place of strictness and stringency and the attribute of justice. So if we say every person has emotions, am I my emotions? No, but my emotions are part of me. In the same way, Hashem has attributes, midot, that are not Hashem, but they're attributes of Hashem. And just like we have a sense of justice, and we can be strict. We can be strict with ourselves, and we can be strict with other people. For example, a person who their doctor says to them, you cannot smoke anymore. If you smoke, you're going to die. When the person decides, even though they love smoking, they're going to stop smoking because they don't want to die. That's gvura. They're able to be strict with themselves. Or for example, a parent that brushes their children's teeth, even when they go crazy and kick you and spit in your face, and I've had all that done to me personally, you still get on top of the kid and brush their teeth, because when you say, okay, I'm going to be compassionate to the kid, I'm not going to brush their teeth, and then you take them to the dentist to have a tooth pulled or to have a root canal done, then you feel terrible that you didn't brush their teeth. So the next kid, that's by the way why the firstborn gets double in an inheritance, because they suffered from the parents not knowing what's going on. I'm assuming that's part of it. So I don't know. I don't have any money to leave to my kids right now. Anyhow, I have a house, a very expensive house. But whatever it is, I'm assuming the firstborn will get more than the others, because that's the way it's supposed to be. So you have gvura, you have this stringency, because you learn from your first kid not to be so lenient. Koach. Shalom Aleichem. Come on in. We have people online. You're the person in person. You want some water?
I need a restroom, actually.
Okay, you know where it is?
No.
Go straight here. You'll see the mirror. That's the door next to the mirror is the bathroom. Okay, take your time. Okay, so that's the attribute of gevurot. And then din, of course, everybody has a sense of justice. So most people would feel like if somebody very rich caused a poor person to suffer, then the rich person should really compensate the poor person. And where does that feeling come from? That feeling comes from the attribute midat adin, the attribute of judgment. So Hashem has these, and they come from a very high place. If I take this bottle here, I say we're down here. Let's say that all of the midot that I'm talking about are all the way up here in this high spiritual place, just to give you some visualization of it. Yiva'er ki mizeh ba'im la'adam tzarot. Now he's going to explain that this is the reason that a person has troubles. Ki ksheyesh la'adam tzarot, because when a person has troubles, yeda sheyetzer hara yitchazek alav lehechatio. You should know that when you are suffering and you have troubles and afflictions, the yetzer hara is going to get stronger and try to get you to sin. Boom. I love how Rabbi Nachman just puts it out there. V'al kain mi sheyesh alav dinim chas v'shalom. So a person that's suffering from supernal judgments, God forbid, and that's basically everybody. V'yesh lo mechimat elu hadinim eze tzara rachmana etzlan. And a person has some type of trouble or affliction, God should help us, save us, because of these judgments above. צריך לראות, להשתדל מאוד, להינצל מהיצר עוז. you have to make a supreme effort to free yourself from this very strong yetzer hara. Ki ikar ha-yetzera hu me'adinim, because the main yetzera comes from this high place of din, of judgment, and not just from lust or desire to do a transgression. V'lachen im chas v'shalom ro'eh. So if God forbid a person sees she'shorim alav dinim, that a person is receiving a lot of judgments from heaven, Yeda sheyetzera mitchazek me'od kenegdo. You should know that the yetzera is really working hard against you. V'tzarich latet el libo lizaher bimyuchad bezman kazeh mipituyei yetzer hara. And so you have to know that if the yetzera is coming to you, you have to make an extra special effort to fight the yetzera. So I'll tell you where we are. When a person is suffering judgments and stringencies from heaven, and any suffering at all, if you never suffered in your life, I know.
No.
Then you should know that the yetzer is going to be stronger. When you're suffering, the yetzer is going to be stronger. And you have to make it a supreme effort to avoid the temptations of the yetzer. Because you know what happens when everything is blown, you just say, screw it all. And whatever that thing that you don't allow yourself to do, just say, oh yeah, I'm going to do that big time. That is the yetzer. And when does that come? When you feel broken. When you feel like, that's it, I'm done, I'm on the floor, can't get up. Oh, screw it. I'm just going to, I remember years ago there was a guy who told me he used to buy these hundreds of shekels of meat, like steak and hamburgers, and he told me, I'm wasting so much money, but it makes me feel good to eat them. And he wanted to stop eating them, wanted to stop spending so much money on those things. That's the type of thing that the yetzer comes and does. He's like, you're suffering, so I'm going to make you do something that you don't want to do and make you suffer even more. And sometimes it goes a lot further than that. And even if a person isn't a tzaddik, she'en yetzera shelo malach kodesh, it's in quotes here, that even if a person's evil inclination is not on the level of being a spiritual angel, ela ba alav me'akirut adamim v'gufo hamegusham, but rather it comes just simply from lusts and desires and the physical body, gam az ksheyesh lo tzara, that even then also then when a person has troubles, hu tzarich lizaher ma'od me'agvurot yetzer shelo. Me'hitgabrut yetzer shelo. So we're not talking about the level of King David or Shlomo, that a person is being tested from heaven, from the supreme place, but even from our regular stuff, I shouldn't be doing that and I shouldn't be doing this and I'm doing it anyhow. A person has to fight against that yetzer that's going to strengthen themselves. Now, just to clarify, and I've said this many times before, why would Hashem do such a thing? Why would Hashem make a yetzer that tests us and tempts us all the time? And that's the only way we can have free will. And that's the whole purpose of creation. And that's why we're tested again and again and again. And that's why even somebody like King David is tested, because you would think that a person that's on that level, they're already beyond all testing from Hashem. But no, everybody on their level is going to be tested by Hashem. And I have mentioned before that according to Chabad Hasidus, at least my understanding of Chabad Hasidus, the tzaddik has turned his yetzer into the yetzer tov, to serve the yetzer tov, and never actually has to fight with the yetzer anymore. But Rabbi Nachman says, and I'm assuming from personal experience, that you have to fight the yetzer even if you're a complete tzaddik. Shemitgaber be'ota sha'a, that strengthen itself in that exact moment when you're feeling most broken. V'tama davar, and the reason for this is ki afilu ha'yetzera ha'av ve'agashmi she'akirut adamim, even this gross and low yetzer that comes just from the physical lusts of the body, sheyeshno etzlo anashim megushamim shehem rov ha'olam, that physical beings have, which is most of the world, meaning we're not on the level of being a tzaddik that we're like an angel. Bivadai yesh lo shoash lamala heimenu. Then of course, even though we have this lust for doing something that we shouldn't be doing, the root for that comes from a very high place. So before I was showing the bottle here, just to give an idea of a high place. So let's say we're all the way down here in spiritual levels, where that lust is coming from a very high place. And there's also a good analogy that this comes and it becomes smaller, because in a second we're going to see why. So it comes from a higher place than that. And that yetzer that's up above, it also has a root. Till we reach the supernal root, or the original root, which is, of course, Hashem. He says, Shehu Malach HaKodesh, which is the angel, the holy angel up above, but above the holy angel is Hashem. Haba me gvurot v'dinim shelamala, that comes from the judgment and stringencies up in heaven. Umemele sheyesh lo tzarot v'dinim. And so it follows that when a person has troubles and judgments against them, and everybody has troubles and judgments against them, yeshna yenika gdola lechol hamadrigot shel yetzer. The yetzer derives sustenance from every single step of the ladder of the yetzer, going up and going down. Ad shemegia gam el hayetzer hamegusham shelo, until it comes all the way down to our physical yetzer. Shehu akirut damim, which comes from the thickness of the blood, meaning confused thoughts. Shu mitgaber alav lehechatio, that strengthens a person in order to get them to transgress and sin. Ubior ha'inyan, and let's explain this idea. Ki yesh kama bchinot beyetzer. There are several aspects of the yetzer. V'yesh yetzer she'eino megusham kol kach, and there's a type of yetzer that's not so physical. She'eino me'akirut damim, that doesn't come from the confused thoughts of a person. Shel ha'adam choteh ba'atzmo, that the person that transgresses themselves. Ach hu b'chinat klipa daka, but rather it comes from a very thin husk. So you can think of the sesame seed. Oh, that's a good analogy. I was thinking of a coconut. So the coconut has the thick outer layer.
It said
a thin klipa.
Husk.
Right.
A thin husk, which the sesame seed has.
Yeah, the sesame seed definitely is a good analogy. I was just thinking that there are layers. It doesn't start with that, because like also garlic has a very thin skin. But I wanted to think of something that has a better analogy. So the coconut, I grew up in Florida where there are a lot of coconuts, and in the Boy Scouts we ate a lot of coconuts. So you pull off the heavy husk. Mm-hmm. Outside then there's the nut. Then you break the nut. Then you take out the meat or the pulp. There's also hopefully the milk inside. We would always drink that, very sweet, beautiful. In brown peel on the white meat inside of the coconut. And that's the klipa daka. So you have the heavy klipot, the external husk, and then you have this thin. Ve'ina klipa kol kach kamo gimel klipot hakashot. And this is why I give that analogy. And it's not that thick like the external hard husks that are outside of it. Ela shi klipa daka. But rather it's a thin covering, a thin husk. So it says here regarding this matter, in Yechezkel, muskeret gimel klipot kashot, it's mentioned the three types of external hard outer layers. Ruach se'ara v'gomer, anan gadol ve'esh mit lakachat. So we have a strong storm, we have heavy clouds, and we have, I guess, what would it be? A consuming fire. V'ken niskeret klipat noga. And it's also mentioned the klipa of noga, which we talked about before, shehi klipa hadaka, which is the thin husk. ha'omedet bein shalosh haklipot leben hakadusha, which exists between the external, heavy-duty, clear klipot and the actual kedusha, the holiness. There's this very fine layer. So, just to give another analogy, let's imagine klipa. We have lots of layers of klipa, and then we have this very thin layer over here before we get into the kedusha. And there's a reason that he's mentioning this, not just saying this for fun. ויש בכוחן לבלבל את האדם לפתות אותו לעשות עבירות מתוך מחשבה שהן מצוות גדולות. So this thin klipa, this thin divider or husk, it has the power to confuse a person and to tempt a person to do transgressions from a place of thinking that they're doing great mitzvahs. That's the trick. So before, the yetzer comes and says, steal something. Like, I'm not going to steal something. So the yetzer says, you need to have a meal for 500 singles, and you need to raise all the money for it, and you need to cook all the food for it, and you need to get everybody to come, and you need to do this whole thing. That's what you have to do. That would be the yetzer coming from the other direction. There are people that can do that, but most people can't do that. וגם yetzer, גם זה היתר, בא מקליפת נוגה דקה. Also, this yetzer is coming from this thin husk of which is called noga. אינו יתר של הקדושים בעלי חוכמה ודעת. This is not the yetzer that comes from holy people that have wisdom and a clear vision of Hashem in the world. כי אצלם הוא רק יתר של המעלה. Their yetzer is only from up above. So, for a person that's on this level, we mentioned it before, their yetzer, I'm not sure if it was in this lesson or another lesson, their yetzer comes from forgetting Hashem, forgetting to acknowledge Hashem. So somebody who's a great rabbi, for example, who's not humble. That's the simplest example. They are a great rabbi, they have achieved a great level, but they lost their humility, and that loss of humility is their yetzer. They're not tempted by sex, non-kosher food, stealing, gambling, smoking. None of those things interest them. They're a tzaddik as far as that's concerned. But if they're arrogant, that's their yetzer. So he's saying, we're not talking about that level of yetzer. Shehu malach kodesh, which is called the heavenly angel. Shu bechinat gvurot v'dinim, which comes from this very high place of stringency and judgment. V'hu tachlit hashorosh ha'elyon shel kol hayetzerim hara'im. And this is the supernal root of all of the yetzeras. Mea yetzer ha'elyon ad yetzer tachton amegusham umezuham. From the supernal yetzera all the way down to the lowest level of yetzera, which is in a physical body and polluted or disgusting. Hashote ve'apeti ve'hasachal. The foolish, the three words for foolish people. Akirata demim comes from the thickness of the blood, meaning confusing thoughts. Meaning, if you're going to steal something, you've confused yourself. If the doctor tells you smoke cigarettes, you're going to die and you smoke cigarettes anyhow, you've confused yourself. If you're having an affair, you've confused yourself. Those types of things. Al ken sheyesh ala adam dinim. So when a person has judgments, me'achar shemitgaber alav gvurot v'dinim, since then the judgments and stringencies are getting stronger against the person, shehu hashorish shel kol hayetzer, which is the root of all the yetzer. Al ken az mitgaber alav me'od hayetzer shelo be'ezeh b'china sheyesh lo. Then the yetzer is going to come and really give it to you. The yetzer is going to be very, very strong. Now we all know that place where we feel broken and we just say to the yetzer, go for it. I'm going to do all kinds of things I shouldn't do. We've all been there. I've been there myself many times. And that's when, so he's saying, you should know, that's when the yetzer is coming, that's when the yetzer is strongest. And he says, be'ezeh b'china sheyesh lo. Every person on their level. So the yetzer for my friend is not my yetzer, and my yetzer is not his yetzer. Everybody has a custom-made yetzer. כי יש ליצרה יניקה גדולה מהשורש שלמעלה. The yetzer receives a great deal of sustenance from its root up above, מחימת שמתגבר עליו צרות ודינים. Because it gets stronger when a person has troubles and afflictions. וצריך השתדלות והתחזקות על זה להינצל מהיצרה. A person has to make an effort and to truly strengthen themselves to overcome the יצרה. כיוון שנתבאר שישנם בחינות ומדרגות רבות של היצרה, since he explained that there are many levels and many steps of the יצרה, and יבאר כאן מרונת, now Reb Nassim is going to bring an addition to explain this, בבחינה מסוימת של יצרה, a certain attribute of the יצרה, וכיצד יש להיזהר ממנו, and how we have to be careful to protect ourselves from this. בהגעה כאן הוסיף מרונת, here Reb Nassim added to the lesson of Likutey Moharan, גם בעניין התקרבות עצמו להשם יתברך, also regarding coming close to Hashem. יש יצר הרע גדול. There is a very big יצרה in wanting to come close to Hashem. להתקרב בריבוי אור. ואחר כך בא נפילה. To come close to the overwhelming light and then afterwards to be knocked down and have a downfall. כלומר, שלפעמים ריבוי התלהבות חוץ מהמידה לעשות עבודות במדרגות שאינם שייכות לו. So sometimes a person gets excited, has an extra level of excitement to do something that beyond, in the service of Hashem, that's beyond their ability or they don't have the kelim for it, they don't have the vessels for it. And this is the yetzer that's tempting the person to do this thing. Like I said before, like I mentioned about having a meal for 500 singles and taking care of everything yourself, you just have like this crazy idea, this is what I have to do. That's a yetzer. Kedei likashlob lebasof, in order to cause a person to fail in the end, to knock the person down. Ki zeu b'chinat hakatuv v'matan Torah. This is what's written about the receiving of the Torah. Sheyisia kadosh baruch hu et am Yisrael shelo yitkavu yoter midai. Hashem says to Moshe, tell the Jewish people, do not come close to Mount Sinai when the Torah is being received. Diktiv, a certain Sefer Shmot, pen yihalsu el Hashem lirot v'nafal mimenu rav, so that they would not cross through the border, because they set up a fence, in a sense, around Mount Sinai.
12 pillars that were built around the
12 pillars, okay, I'm going to take your word. 12 makes sense, 12 pillars. And apparently there's some rope or some cloth or something that was blocking it. So he says, tell the people not to do it, because if they come, they won't have the vessels to handle it, and instead of being elevated, they'll have a descent, or they'll fall. As it's also explained in another place. So this is in another place, meaning Likutey Moharan. This is Tinyana Torah Hey Ot Zayin. V'zeh Lashono. It's in the second part of Likutey Moharan. צריך כל אחד ואחד לצמצם את מוחו ושכלו, שלא להניח את המוח לצאת חוץ לגבול שיש לו. Everybody has to limit constrict their mind and their consciousness and their logic in order that they don't allow their mind to reach a place which is outside of its limitations. שלא יהיה משוטט המוח במה שאין לו רשות לפי מדרגתו. That a person shouldn't allow their mind to drift off to a place where they don't have permission to be according to their spiritual level. Bibchinat, this is connected to, and this is from Chagiga, b'mufla mimcha al tidrosh, and something that's greater than you don't ask. B'mechase mimcha al tachko, something that's hidden from you, don't try to unveil it. V'chule, and so on. She'asor lo lelech b'sichlo ki im ad hagvul lo yoter. A person can go to their limit, but they shouldn't go any further. Ki chol echad ve'echad yesh lo gvul v'tzimtzum b'sichlo lefi erko. Everybody has a limit to how far they can go intellectually in grasping Hashem. She'afilu b'kedusha asor lo latzet chutz legvul sheyesh lo. Even when it comes to matters of holiness, a person should not cross the limit that they have. This is something that's greater than you. Don't ask for it, or don't ask questions about it, as mentioned above. This is the quote that we had from before about Mount Sinai. Don't try to go up Mount Sinai if you're not Moshe Rabbeinu. Ki yesh yetzer gadol shematchil litkarev laHashem yitbarach. There's a big yetzer that comes when a person tries to come closer to Hashem. So I'll give you an example. I was in this program called Livnot or Libanot. I mentioned before I was proudly kicked off the program. Literally, my bags were packed and I was shoved on a bus to Gaza. That's when there were still kibbutzim in Gaza. Because one of the guys in the program was from a kibbutz in Gaza, and he said, "Oh, don't worry, I arranged a bed for you." But I got off the bus in Jerusalem and never made it to Gaza. Kind of unfortunately. I'm sorry I didn't go spend time in that kibbutz.
Why would you say that? You've got a beautiful wife and lots of children.
Oh yeah, well that wasn't the time that I met my wife.
Okay.
Anyhow, so why did I get kicked off of Livnot? Because I was on the slow path of becoming religious. And by that point I was committed to a life of Torah and mitzvot, but going very slow with everything. And a lot of people in the program just became like Haredi overnight. You know, guys are wearing black hats and black suits, and the girls are wearing tights and long dresses, and I was like normal. I don't think I was even wearing tzitziot back then. I definitely didn't have a beard back then. And I would convince people to slowly let the hat go, let the coat go, dress like you did when you came into the program. And they noticed that I was reverse psychologizing everybody back into being normal. And they told me it's not okay. Our goal is for people to become religious, and you're making people become secular again. And I said the only way that they're going to remain religious is if they do it slowly. And if you push them into it, I didn't know this lesson back then. You push them into it, they're not going to really be religious. And I know there's one person, I'm not really in touch with her, but she does live in Jerusalem. We were friends for a while. She did remain religious. I think most of the other people didn't. And they didn't like it, so they put me on a bus and threw me off the program. And then many years they apologized to me, many years later. They did apologize to me. You want to say something?
I was going to say, no one ever apologized to me.
Okay, well, I haven't They threw you off also?
Well, it was Aish. It wasn't.
Aish. I also got kicked out of Aish. I have a whole list of places that kicked me out here.
I get kicked out of one yeshiva.
Okay. So he says there's a special yetzer that comes when a person comes close to Hashem. So I'll give you another example. So my son, Levi Yitzchak, he recently had a bar mitzvah, and he decided that he's a Chabadnik, and he wanted a hat, he wanted 2 hats, he wanted a coat, he wanted 2 coats, he wanted this, he wanted that. And he asked me for the money for it, and I told him, no, go to the shuk, play, make money, and buy the hat by yourself. Because that way I would know that it really meant something to him.
Yeah.
And he did. He did, and within like 2 days he had the money, 650 shekels, he ran to the store, he bought himself a black hat. Okay. I bought him the tefillin. The tefillin costs 9,000 something shekels. Although I did ask him if he could make the 650, he should pay 1,000 shekels for the tefillin as well, which he proudly did. Just so that he has some feeling of ownership. It's very important. But when a person wants to make a commitment to do something like that, and also in my house there's a lot of flexibility, if you decide that you're no longer Chabad. Yeah. It's so fascinating when your kids come and say, how come you weren't flexible with us? I'm like, do you know what house you grew up in? We have everything in this house. Yeah. So should he decide to not be a Chabadnik, I don't think it'll be such a big deal. But it does happen that somebody would say, for example, I want to wear a black coat, or a woman would say, I want to dress in a very sneastic way or something like that. And then there's a big yetzer that comes along with that. So only if it's truly sincere. And also I had another side note. When my children were younger, I sent everybody to Chabad education, and the schools didn't like me because I look like this, and I don't wear a black hat and a black coat. And I do have a black kippah. It's actually in my talis bag that I would switch for going to the schools whenever I had to. But they knew that it was, folded in the back of my back pocket, as the joke of Israelis. There's three types of right-wing voters. There's black kippahs, there's knit kippahs, and there's the folded kippah. That was from a mitzvot. That was pretty clever. So at some point I said, okay, I'm doing my children a disservice by not dressing the way that their educators dress. And I said, I'll start wearing a hat and a coat on Shabbos. But I figured I better ask some of the rabbis in my life before I do that. So I started with Reb Shalom. And Reb Shalom said, you wear one and I'll start wearing one. So I said to him, you wear one and I'll start wearing one. And that's where that ended. I said to Rabbi Gestetner, and he said, you do that, I won't let you lead the davening in Mayinot. I asked somebody else who was like a very serious Chabad rabbi I'm friends with, and he said, I wish I'd never put on a black coat and a black hat. Thought that was interesting. And the last person I asked, who was the one that really gave me the answer, which is Rabbi Silberg, he said, you have to only do it if it's sincere. It's something that you want to do, if it's an expression of you. If not, it'll backfire on you. You'll put on a hat and coat, and your kids will think it's just a show, and they won't get what you want from it. So it wasn't sincere, it wasn't what I wanted to do, so I didn't do it. But I'm just giving an example of how the yetzer comes when you want to come close to Hashem. Sherotzeh limnoa mimenu et hitkavut. This yetzer wants to prevent a person from coming close to Hashem. Oh, good. We're almost at the end of this section here. V'aseh zot al yedei shemiatz'o la'asot avodot kashot ugudulot. And how does the yetzer do this? The yetzer comes and recommends to a person that they do some very big and difficult service of Hashem. That a person cannot withstand that test. U'lebasof yipol mikol avodato. And in the end, the person will fall from all of this trying to come close to Hashem from the service of Hashem. V'al ken b'sha'at matan Torah. And so in the time of giving of the Torah, Yisir Hashem itbarach Moshe, Hashem warned Moshe, Red he'ed ba'am pen ye'asu el Hashem lirot. Go down and warn the people that they should not cross the border, that they should not see the revelation of Hashem that's being revealed in Mount Sinai. Ki Yisrael hayu az b'ma'ala gedola, because the Jewish people then were on a very high spiritual level. V'utztachu lehaziram me'a yetzer gadol sheyesh b'hitkavut laHashem yitbarach. And so he had to warn the Jewish people that had a great desire to come close to Hashem, to be careful that there's a yetzer also in coming close to Hashem. And that's a test for anybody who comes close to Hashem on any level. Even if you have never kept a single mitzvah in your whole life, the second you do, the yetzer is going to come and tempt you. Going to tempt you to do more than you should. He's going to tempt you to go the other way. And that's the battle that we face. And just like with everything else, you get better at it over time. But you can never give up. You can never say, okay, I've reached this spiritual level, so the yetzer is never going to come to me again. It's not true. The yetzer is always going to come. There's always going to be a yetzer. Even those people that reach the level of being a complete tzaddik, there will be some type of yetzer. What can be the yetzer of a complete tzaddik? One of the things, I wrote this in my book, Ashtikul Shalom, that I said to Shalom, I had a friend that was a Rosh Hashiva and a friend that's a multi-millionaire. And we were peers. The Rosh Hashiva wasn't anybody special at one point, and the multi-millionaire, who might even be, he's probably not a billionaire, but he's managing quite a lot of money. he once came to me and he said he didn't have any money. Like, it was crazy. And here I am, not a Rosh Yeshiva, and I'm not rich. So his answer to me was, you go to work, you support your family, that's all you have to do. That's what's most important. And he says, what do you think? The Rosh Yeshiva doesn't want more students in his yeshiva, doesn't want better students in his yeshiva, and the wealthy person doesn't want to give more tzedakah, doesn't want more money. So don't think that those people don't have a yetzer. Both of them have a yetzer. Even the greatest scholar has a yetzer, wants people to read his work, wants people to hear what he has to say. Okay, so I have a short story that was given over by Rabbi Chaim Shaul Brook. I don't know if that's how you said his name in Hebrew, who was affectionately known as Sho'oili. I don't know how you say that. Okay, I won't even say it. Lived from 1894 to 1965, and he was the Rosh Yeshiva of, it just says, of the Yeshiva in Rishon LeZion. So he was known for giving over like stories that had a moral to them. And this is the story. There was a governor or some nobleman and his assistant. They were out hunting, and a big storm came, and the party that was with them got lost, and they lost the nobleman and his assistant, and they wandered through the woods until they found this little hut. And there's a very poor Jew there, and he welcomes them in. And they're not looking so noble at that point after being in the forest and the mud and all that stuff. And so they say, can we stay in your little hut for the night? Because we're stuck here in the storm. He says, sure, come on in. He has a little goat in the back. He says, I can give you a little bit of goat milk. I have a little bit of like dry bread from a couple days ago. I can give you that. And so they take the dry bread and they take the goat milk, and they sleep on this straw mattress on the floor in his hut. And in the morning, the weather is good, and they ask him what's the direction to the palace. He tells them, and they go on their way. A few hours later, this very fancy carriage shows up at the hut, and he says, what did I do? Why are you here? He said, the nobleman wants to see you. He said, what did I do? They put him in the carriage, they bring him to the nobleman. The nobleman says, don't you recognize me? I slept in your hut last night. Of course, he didn't expect it was the nobleman. The nobleman already has tailors waiting. They make a beautiful suit for him. He gives him lots of money, gives him a plot of land, gives him all this stuff. So his neighbor hears that his friend became rich by hosting people and giving them a little bit of goat milk, hosting the nobleman, giving them a little goat milk and some dry bread. So do you think if the neighbor went to the nobleman and said, here's some goat milk and dried bread, he would also give him all that wealth? Of course he wouldn't give it to him, because it depends on the place and the time. Right, the situation. So what was this an analogy for? This was an analogy of this time in exile, when the Shekhinah is exiled along with us, and its hardships are our hardships. So when we do something small for our fellow Jew, Hashem considers it as if we brought the nobleman into the hut and gave him a little bit of dry bread and goat's milk. So every little thing we do for our fellow Jews, Bezat Hashem, we should know that Hashem appreciates it just like that. And it doesn't say this here, but I'll add a blessing that everybody should also be blessed with wealth and health and wisdom and revealed good, Bezat Hashem. Shkoyach to everybody for watching, and especially to Koach for coming. And we'll continue again next week, Bezat Hashem. If I can turn off the... There's something blocking the button. There we go.